Hi everyone, welcome to this week's Halton Hills Housing Update. So tons to cover today with September's numbers, as well as again, still interesting things happening in our market week to week. So let's look at what happened. So in September of 2022, so last September, we sold 62 units, which was again down significantly from the year before, which was 81. And our average price was 1,139, so 1,139,000. This past September, we are down to 49 units. I was actually surprised that we even sold 49, but we had quite a few properties transact last week. So that number took a big jump last week, but 49 properties sold. So that's down 20% year over year. And our average price, no surprise, is down to $1,079,000. So that's down over 5% year over year. And I mean, we talked about August numbers. August, there was some really high sales in August that kind of pulled all the values up, and our average price was around 1.3, which was not reflective of the market we were feeling. So technically we're down like 17% since August, which I don't think is like true apples to apples, but it does show where our prices are going, and I am not surprised that we're at $1,079,000. Last October, we were under $1 million on our average price in Halton Hills, and I suspect that that might be the case again this October. We're seeing some pretty significant drops in our pricing, and so it will be interesting to see what happens in October here, because inventories very high and our prices are definitely softening. So looking at what happened last week, in Georgetown last week, we had 9 sales, which is a normal-ish number for Georgetown, definitely a lot better than the previous weeks in September. And there was quite a few, not like almost half of them sold over $1 million. So there was some higher ticket stuff that sold, which was a change. We were seeing that market completely dead. So 9 sales last week, decent in Georgetown. We did have 20 new listings. So again, we're seeing very high new listings, and just the sales are not supporting that, so our inventory is climbing. Looking at Acton, Acton had 3 sales. Like, good for Acton. It is still chugging along. It had like over 30% of the sales in Halton Hills for September. Like, there was quite a few properties transacting, and some weeks it was almost on par with what Georgetown was selling. So you go Acton, because normally when Georgetown has this much inventory, Acton is completely dead, but Acton's still chugging along. And there was no new listings there, so that's interesting. We're seeing a ton of new listings in Georgetown, but there was no new listings in Acton last week. Glen Williams and Limehouse both had no sales and no new listings. So looking at our rural market, we had 2 sales last week. That's good, something moved there, and 4 new listings, so things are still coming up in the rural market. One thing I want to touch on that I've been touching on the last few weeks as this market really transitions is the properties that are coming off of the market and sort of things that are adjusting in pricing. So last week when I pulled the expireds, terminated, suspended, there was 17 properties within that pocket. So within that 17, 3 of them reduced their price. They relisted at a lower price. 2 of them went up in price, because that's the strategy right now. 1 just relisted at the same price, but the notable thing is that 11 properties came off the market and didn't re-enter. So they did not relist their houses. So inventory didn't skyrocket this week because we had 11 properties that just came completely off the market. The sellers are definitely not getting the numbers they want right now, and the same thing that happened last year is happening this year. So we are going to start to see a lot more properties just coming off the market because it's just a really bad market right now for sellers. So that is what, leading into our active inventory, sort of kept inventory at bay this week. So looking at all of Halton Hills, we had 204 active listings that last week, and we are down to 203 active listings this week. So I mean, pretty even, but again, like more listings than sales, but because we're seeing houses just come off the market, it's keeping our inventory week to week pretty balanced. Looking at Georgetown, last week they had 122 active listings. We're up to 126 active listings. So still not the highest we've ever seen, but it's definitely not going in the direction that sellers want to see. Looking at our price points, under 800,000 went from 12 down to 11. So that price point still moving, some condo townhomes, but there's a couple of freehold properties that are pretty decent under 800,000 right now. 800 to $1 million, this is really interesting. So it went from 20 to 24 active listings. I think this is the highest I've ever seen in that pocket. And that is usually our pocket that is transacting like very rapidly. And I mean, we're not seeing a boatload of sales, but usually the majority of them are in that pocket, and inventory doesn't usually skyrocket there. So to see inventory sitting that high between 800 and $1 million is kind of interesting and really giving us a picture of what the market's doing. 1 to 1.5 million, not up this week, but like still really high. Last week was 55, this week 54. So technically went down one. We had a couple of those come off the market too, and a couple of sales over $1 million again, like I talked about. So 54 properties available, but that's a high number. There are so many properties available between 1 and 1.5 million. Like it's a lot. So that is not great news for the sellers in that pocket. 1.5 million plus went from 35 to 36 active listings. And you know my spiel on that price point. It is pretty dead. Very rare to see stuff transacting over 1.5 million, but you still got a lot of those people asking for those big prices, and inevitably they will start to come down. So looking at Acton this week, Acton actually went down from 31 to 27 active listings. So still sitting quite high in Acton, but not in the 30s. So I guess that's a silver lining. And the rest of the markets remain the same. So Glen Williams stayed the same at 5, Limehouse stayed the same at 3, and the rural market stayed the same at 43. So that is incredibly high for the rural market. So you can sort of see my theme here. I mean, it's no surprise that our September numbers are softened significantly versus last year. You know, last September was not a great market, and definitely like things were changing and plummeting at that point as well. But even still, our numbers are worse this September than last September. And we're not even like, we're still way behind where we were 2 years ago. So we're in line right now, and I think we're going to be getting back to about 2020 pricing. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in October. I really think we're going to see a very low average price point. And people are always asking, like, is it going to rebound in the spring? And I just don't know. This feels different. I mean, our interest rates are much higher, and it feels like with how high the inventory is, I just don't know how far prices will go down and like what that will look like on the bounce back. So we're just going to have to be watching. But I will be back next Tuesday to see sort of how October starts, to see if we can get a feel for what's going to happen this month. Have a great week, everyone.